The battle outside St. Petersburg ended quickly. No one expected this at all. Many people were waiting for Zenit to become a laughingstock of the continent, hoping that this empire that was full of potential could be destroyed and buried in blood and bones. The empires close to Zenit already moved their troops to the borders, waiting to fight for Zenit's territory after the royal family of Zenit was wiped out. Once news about the conquering of St. Petersburg spread out, they would instantly divide Zenit's territory like a bunch of ants eating away an elephant. However, the ending was dramatic. Instead of being destroyed, Zenit obtained a demigod during this process. This news was spread in the region like a tornado. Once a demigod appeared, all heroes would shiver in fear. For a moment, the empires that had troops close by the borders and were ready to invade Zenit were terrified by the news, and their emperors were scared. They instantly removed the soldiers from the area and imprisoned the nobles who suggested such operations before traveling tens of thousands of kilometers to bring the criminals and a lot of gifts to St. Petersburg, trying to garner forgiveness. At the same time, the 10 Empire united troops, including the Leon Empire, instantly retreated and left Zenit overnight. In only 4 days, the war in the southern region of Zenit ended, and the territories were reclaimed. Without a choice, those 10 empires all announced their defeat and sent envoys to St. Petersburg. Along with a ton of treasures, those envoys came to Zenit and expressed their empire's willingness to compensate Zenit with a portion of their land and recognize Zenit as their leader. Even the Leon Empire that was dominant in the northern region of Azeroth had to drop its arrogance and sent the largest envoy group to St. Petersburg, saying that Leon was willing to become an ally with Zenit, and they could rule the northern region of Azeroth together. This was the first time in the history of the northern region of Azeroth that the Leon Empire actively expressed their friendliness and even begged a little. This was the power of a demigod. After years of laying low, Emperor Yasin, who claimed to be inferior to no one, reappeared and advanced to the demigod realm. Everyone knew that almost no one in the northern region of Azeroth could handle him. Now, the most anxious and embarrassed people were those envoys who were still inside St. Petersburg. Before the big battle, they came to St. Petersburg arrogantly and put pressure on the royal family by asking Zenit to execute the king of Chambord, threatening to attack if their demands were not met. Now, it seemed like they turned from overlords to slaves. Even if they acted low-key now, it was useless. When the news of Zenit obtaining victory came through, the envoys who hid inside their hotels couldn't believe their ears. After checking multiple times and making sure that the news wasn't wrong, all the envoys wanted to dig holes in the ground before burying themselves in there. They hated themselves for appearing inside the Zenit Empire. These envoys were gritting their teeth and waiting for the victory of D'Alessandro, number 2 disciple of the Continental Martial Saint. That was the only way they could get revenge. Now they had to gather together in fear and try to come up with a new plan. In the end, they arrived at one conclusion. They had to surrender to Zenitians and beg for mercy. This was the only possible way of staying alive and getting their empires out of trouble. If they made mistakes and caused their empire's destruction, they would be guilty forever. When they walked out of the hotel district, they realized that everything changed too fast. The officials of Zenit who bowed to them and greeted them with respect now looked at them like unwanted dogs. Even the ordinary Zenitians looked at them in disdain. When they walked up to these civilians and tried to strike a conversation, they were greeted by eye rolls or bad eggs and rotten vegetables. The officials of Zenit who were greedy now wouldn't acknowledge them even if they brought a mountain of gold. After a series of attempts, these envoys were beaten by sticks and dirted by bad eggs, and they were all kicked out of St. Petersburg. These envoys were all warriors, and they were quite powerful and fully armed. However, they didn't dare to do anything even against a beggar on the street. When the civilians of Zenit chased after them and kicked them out, they didn't dare to fight back. In just 4 to 5 days, the news spread across the entire northern region of Azeroth. All the empires were stunned, and almost all of them sent envoys to Zenit. The only exception was the Anji Empire. Since their emperor was killed in Zenit, they were put between a rock and a hard place. The death of their emperor made them the only empire that couldn't submit to Zenit. They had to wage war against Zenit according to tradition. However, the Anji Empire wasn't next to the Zenit Empire. Therefore, they couldn't send troops even after they waged war. Right now, Everyone could tell that Angians were like ants on a hot pan. They were afraid that Emperor Yasin, who became a demigod, would send troops to conquer the Angie Empire. After all, the anger of a god couldn't be taken on by humans. Fortunately for them, the Zenit Empire wasn't internally peaceful. The southern region was just taken back, and a lot of things had to be managed. It seemed like the Zenit Empire didn't have the energy to deal with them. Those nobles who survived the cleansing operation launched by the two princes were planning to cry in front of Emperor Yasin and ask him to uphold justice. But Emperor Yasin didn't come back to manage the empire as everyone expected. He still lived the hermit lifestyle. He didn't see anyone and almost disappeared. Only a series of royal orders came out of the royal palace. The control over the military and administrative functions of Zenit was still in the hands of Elder Prince Arshavin, Elder Princess Tanasha, the top-tier officials, and the military officers who survived that night in the imperial military headquarters. It was clear that Emperor Yasin wasn't planning to change the power dynamics of Zenit, and it seemed like he didn't plan to hold the creators of the Night of Bleeding accountable. At the same time, Second Prince Dominguez was given a large duty, becoming the most senior decision-maker in the southern region of Zenit. He was responsible for repairing the military and administrative functions of the southern region of Zenit that had been destroyed. As the only military leader who stayed in the territories taken by the enemies and continued to resist, King Constantine of Byzantine was also rewarded. The Byzantine kingdom became a level 1 affiliated kingdom, and King Constantine of Byzantine became a level 2 noble of Zenit. The battle for the throne between the two princes still seemed to be in a stalemate in outsiders' eyes. Both princes used the same strategy, and the young officers who were loyal and had clean backgrounds were promoted and filled the important positions in a short time. The entire atmosphere in Zenit changed, turning from old and tired to new and fresh. It seemed like war hawks took the helm, and the empire became more direct and aggressive. This change made the old noble families who were trying to reclaim their privileges quiet down again. However, just as everything calmed down, some politicians who liked to gamble believed that there was more trouble. They thought that the king of Chambord and the Chambord kingdom's strength was too high, and they felt like Emperor Yasin wouldn't be pleased as the ruler of the land. Therefore, they came together and made their voices heard, asking the king of Chambord who caused this crisis to be punished. They said that the Chambord kingdom was too powerful, and it should be restricted. In their words, all the moon-class elites of Chambord should be handed to Zenit and be commanded by the royal family and the imperial military headquarters. These politicians' actions were shameless. However, some despicable characters who were used to guessing the emperor's minds and putting their interest above the empire's jumped out and agreed. Especially some fallen nobles. They acted righteous and created big waves in St. Petersburg. Fei wasn't willing to waste time on these topics that were being discussed in St. Petersburg. The Gold Saints under the king's command also ignored these claims. They would never leave Chambord and be loyal to the royal family of Zenit. If the king didn't restrict these strongmen, they would have broken the mouths of the conspirators in St. Petersburg. After the big battle, Fei didn't hurry back to the Chambord kingdom. Instead, he stayed on the Martial Saint Mountain as the Imperial Martial Saint. It had to be noted that even though most of the corrupted nobles were cleansed in the Night of Bleeding, ensuring Zenit's vitality, many issues remained. For examples, many official positions were currently empty, with Emperor Yasin, a demigod, staying in St. Petersburg. The capital wouldn't get that chaotic. However, a lot of the operations and functions of the government were put on a temporary hold. As a result, many new forces reached out, trying to take this opportunity to grow. The letter office was one of those forces. In just a couple days, Fei had met with many people. Young man Modric, who was one of the two leaders of the letter office, came onto the Martial Saint Mountain several times in secret, passing all the information regarding the events happening in the northern region of Azeroth to Fei. It had been too long since a demigod appeared on the continent, making many warriors doubt that the legends of demigods were fake. Also, many people believed that the natural elements were mutated after the mythical era, suppressing humans more and making it impossible to become a god. Emperor Yasin's performance crushed all those rumors, inciting many masters to want to become gods more and more. The news about the birth of a new demigod rushed around the northern region of Azeroth and the entire continent like storms. Through the fast information networks of Letter Office, Faye could almost instantly learn the reactions of the big empires in the region at the same time. Faye spent some time and energy on teaching his second disciple, Luffy. Faye saw Luffy's performance during the battle of conquering the Imperial Senate, and Faye was pleased. With the rubber's heart physique and the solid foundation that he obtained under one sorta strict supervision, little Luffy was gifted at cultivating the rubber fist. It was heard that several powerful masters appeared in the mythical era and dominated using this fist technique. When cultivated to the highest level, the practitioners could battle gods and demons. For 3 days, Faye taught little Luffy diligently before the cliff on the Marshall St. Mountain. This little guy was brilliant, and his strength increased more and reached peak 7-star after getting real combat experience and pointers from Faye. Such elevation speed even surprised Faye. The sun was about to set, and it dyed the entire sky red, making it look tragic and sad. After Luffy went back to rest, Faye stood before the cliff where the former Marshal Saint, Krasik, died in battle, and he was deep in thought. Suddenly, he raised his hands. His right arm instantly extended for more than 10 meters like a spring, and his fist strike was impressive. Boom! 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 As Faye punched out at the air repeatedly, his arms moved agilely like dragons and snakes, and the trajectory of his fists was mysterious. Each punch contained terrifying power, enough to tear through the sky. This was the rubber fist. Faye had been studying Demon King's sword in the last couple of days, and he paid close attention to rubber fist since he had to teach Luffy. After a few days, he had mastered this technique and knew it well. With his current realm, he was powerful enough to quickly learn all techniques. He could almost understand everything in a flash. Besides, this fist technique wasn't powered by warrior energy, allowing Faye to master it fast. However, Faye didn't have the rubber's heart physique like Luffy. Even though he used his mighty strength to practice rubber fist by force, his arms could only extend for about 15 meters, which was a lot shorter compared to Luffy's arms. This just went to show how important talent was. Unfortunately, this fist technique is too niche and not dominant enough. The practitioners could get the advantage in a fight with someone on their level, but it is impossible to defeat opponents who are levels above. This isn't the path that I'm pursuing. Faye practiced for a bit and then stopped with a lack of interest. In the last few days, he had been thinking about how to increase his strength further in the future. Emperor Yasin's advancement to the demigod realm stimulated Faye. This new demigod had left a seed that contained demigodly power in Faye's mind, and it was sleeping, unable to be awakened. Faye thought about it and felt like he lacked a good opportunity. After doing a few tests, he realized that he couldn't bet everything on this seed. After all, he had to seek other options to increase his strength after passing Hell mode in Diablo World. While sitting on the stone chair by the cliff, Faye took out Demon King's sword from his storage ring, wanting to find a good technique from this martial encyclopedia. This book was thick and profound, containing many techniques. By now, Faye hadn't finished completely reading it through. As the wind fluttered Faye's black long hair, he sunk into the book. Faye only closed Demon King's sword and shook his head after the sun had set. Right now, the bright light coming from St. Petersburg lit up the sky, competing with the stars. The king stood up and stretched. After 3 hours of search, Faye still hadn't found the answer that he was looking for. However, he wasn't anxious. With a thought, he opened a blue portal in front of him and walked into Diablo World. After several days of hard work, Faye had come to the last map in Diablo World, Haragath, and he had completed the first quest, Siege on Haragath, by killing Shank the Overseer at the Bloody Foothills, who was commanding the monsters. The second quest in the final map was Rescue on Mount Arit. Faye accepted the quest from Barbarian Knight Captain Qualkek, and he went to Frigid Highlands to rescue the captive barbarians who were imprisoned by the monsters. He had to save 15 barbarians to finish this quest. This quest cost Faye more than 7 hours. After finishing this quest, Faye's barbarian character was now at Hell mode level 86. What excited Faye more was that his guess became a reality. After he completed this quest, Rescue on Mount Arit, these 15 Sun-class barbarians now could be summoned by Faye, just like what happened after he completed the same quest in normal mode and nightmare mode. This was something that didn't exist in the computer game that Faye played on Earth. Now, Faye could summon these 15 Sun-class barbarians daily, and each summon could last 15 minutes. This was an insane reward. Just imagine. If Faye wanted to, he could call over a bunch of Sun-class lords to battle for him, easily defeating all opponents as a group since Sun-class lords were still rare on Azeroth continent. At least for now, no one below the Burning Sun realm could defeat him. After completing this quest, Faye's daily gaming limit was reached, and the king exited Diablo world. Once returned to the real world, Faye didn't relax. He continued to strengthen his spirit energy according to the mysterious purple scroll. Although Faye had the golden finger Diablo world, he didn't lower his strict standard for himself. If there were time, Faye would try to cultivate and get stronger, walking further on the path of power in a self-torturous fashion. In reality, Faye slept less than 5 hours on average per day ever since he came to Azeroth continent. Except for taking care of the administrative duties of Chambord and battling powerful enemies, he trained and cultivated. Diablo world was the key factor to Faye's strength and current achievement, but his hard work couldn't be ignored. Standing by the edge of the cliff of the Marshall Saint Mountain, Faye's body froze and didn't move. It was silent in the area, and time passed by him quickly like a flowing river. The sky turned from pitch black to a light color. Soon, a sliver of white appeared in the eastern sky, and St. Petersburg that had slept for the whole night gradually woke up. Faye opened his eyes at this moment as well. He opened his mouth and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and he looked a little tired. The training of spirit energy was like forging a piece of iron. If a blacksmith wanted to forge a treasure sword, this piece of iron would have to be hammered tens of thousands of times. If Faye wanted to move his spirit energy forward, he had to train diligently and put in hard work. In some ways, Faye and Dessler were both talented at cultivating spirit energy. Dessler had the bloodline of a hero, and he had been through a lot of hardship and still maintained his pure mind. On the other hand, Faye's soul had traveled through time and space, merging with Alexander's soul. Therefore, his soul was stronger than others, making him have much faster progress in spirit energy growth. When he turned to the wooden house, he rested for about 2 hours, and the sky got bright. At this moment, a messenger came to the mountain, passing the order from the royal family. Emperor Yasin had summoned the imperial martial saint. After thinking for a bit, Faye got down the Martial Saint Mountain in his simple white robe, and he was followed by 8 masters of the Martial Saint Mountain who were left by Marshal Saint Krasik. In a measured pace, Faye walked in the city and moved toward the royal palace. When he was about 500 meters away from the royal palace, a group of people who were wearing fancy clothes rushed out and surrounded him. They all had angry expressions on their faces. These people were of various ages. Some of them were white-haired old men, and some of them were young men. "Who are you? How dare you block the way of Mr. Martial Saint?" One of Faye's followers instantly walked up and shouted in alarm. "Sir, don't misunderstand us. We represent the wishes of the citizens. We are all citizens of Zenith." A noble who was about 30 years old quickly explained. This man was wearing a purple robe that was fancy but not luxurious, and his skin was fair, showing that he had maintained his look. His 3 streaks of goatee below his chin were fixed meticulously, making him look very gentle and wise. It was easy for others to trust him and feel imitate toward him. However, the trace of gloominess in his eyes was hard to detect since he hid it well. The people who came with him were all in fancy clothes, and it looked like they were all nobles. Some of them were anxious, some of them were fearful, and some of them were excited. Standing behind this purple-robed, middle-aged man, it was clear that they were up to something and blocked Faye's path in a line. "Citizens of Zenith?" Faye glanced at their faces and asked lightly, "Why are you blocking my way?" "Sir, please forgive us for blocking your way. We feel anxious as well. However, for the future of the Empire and you, Mr. Martial Saint, we have to do this," the purple-robed man said with a gentle smile on his face. "Sir, my name is Grant, and the people who are here with me today are all loyal and passionate citizens of Zenith. We gathered here today for the future of Zenith, and we are here to ask Mr. Marshal Saint one thing. Just as he said that, the people behind him all rushed up. Since it was already noon, and this was a busy section of the city, a lot of people walked over. Especially after people heard that Mr. Marshal Saint was here, almost everyone in the area gathered around this place. Faye frowned. The purple-robed nobleman saw this, and a trace of joy that was hard to detect appeared in his eyes. This scene was within his calculation. The more people around him, the better it was for him. He had studied this young man in front of him and learned that the king of Chambord valued civilians. Therefore, he believed that the more civilians he could attract, the more likely his plan could succeed. For the future of Zenith? Faye glanced at Grand and smiled. Okay. Then tell me about it. What is affecting the fate of the Empire? The royal family, and I didn't notice it, and you guys have to bring it up? Faye asked in a mocking tone. The king already guessed their intention, and he didn't hide his disdain for them. Purple-robed Grant's expression turned ugly, but he quickly adjusted his mind. With a fake gentle and intimate smile, he earnestly said, Mr. Marshal Saint, you are super talented and have a great track record. You are the second most talented genius of Zenith, and the Chambord Kingdom became a powerful and independent force in Zenith. In this crisis where many masters such as D'Alessandro came, you achieved. Stop right here. There is no need to mention all that. Go into the topic. Faye waved his hand and yawned impatiently. Grant froze for a second. He didn't expect that Mr. Marshal Saint completely ignored his own image and acted this recklessly. After gritting his teeth, Grant shouted, Since this is the case, Mr. Marshal Saint, please pardon my rudeness. Now that the Chambord Kingdom has tens of thousands of elite soldiers, more than 10 Moon-class elites, and you are a powerful master, the strength of Chambord far exceeds the allowance of an affiliated kingdom by law. With a more powerful subject and a weaker lord, the future of the empire will be very unstable. Mr. Marshal Saint, you are loyal to Zenith, but who can be sure that the masters under your command will listen to the royal family of Zenith? Therefore, the 23 of us came here today to beg you to disassemble the Chambord Kingdom and ask the Moon-class elites to serve the royal family of Zenith directly. We know that this might offend you, but we are thinking of Zenith. By listening to our pleas, the trouble will be removed, and you will still be the Imperial Marshal Saint of prestigious status. This is good for both Zenith and you. How dare you? Reckless. After listening to purple-robed Grant, the masters of Marshal Saint Mountain instantly shouted. What this man had said was vicious, shameless, and dirty. In the last few days, a lot of politicians who liked to spectate and gamble thought that they had understood Emperor Yassine's mind, and they had been spreading the point of view where a powerful subject and a weaker lord would lead to chaos. They believed that the king of Chambord's power surpassed what was allowed by the laws of Zenith, planting a seed of division in the empire. If the king of Chambord wanted to rebel, Zenith would be divided, and no one could stop him. These people had been talking to others about this, and they attacked the Chambord kingdom with their words. They said that the king of Chambord attracted an enemy like D'Alessandro and almost destroyed the entire empire. Therefore, it was only responsible for the king of Chambord to disassemble the Chambord kingdom and hand over the masters and troops, focusing on being the Imperial Marshal Saint. To these people, this was the only way to prove the king of Chambord's loyalty to the Zenith Empire. If this were before, the king of Chambord was mighty, and no one in the empire could handle this man. Therefore, no one would trigger him. However, it was different now. Emperor Yasin had become a demigod, and he was able to suppress the king of Chambord greatly. A lot of people with ill intent saw this opportunity. They couldn't hold back and jumped out. Perhaps they didn't dare to battle head-on, but they were great at creating conspiracies. Although they were weak, they wanted to provoke two great masters and create a conflict so that they could gain benefits. Politicians were this crazy. Even though some of them were as weak as ants, they dared to provoke two dragons when they are greedy enough. In the history of Azeroth continent, this played out many times. In most stories, these calculative and strategic ants had the last laugh. Sir, you are a talented genius. Please think for the Empire and accept our plea. Purple-robed Grant kneeled and acted heroic after the masters of Marshal Saint Mountain shouted at him. Under his lead, all the nobles behind him kneeled as well and shouted, trying to move the people who were watching and pressure Faye. The faces of the 8 masters of Marshal Saint Mountain changed color. It was clear that this scene was planned. In front of so many civilians of Zenith, these people blocked Mr. Marshal Saint and tried to get Faye to destroy his own strength using the excuse of the future of Zenith. All of this was to get on the good side of the royal family so that they could have a brighter future and jump into the political sphere. After all, many people believed that Emperor Yasin was thinking about this as well. However, since the king of Chambord has a lot of credit, Emperor Yasin can't come out and say this. We are just helping His Majesty to voice his concern. These people thought to themselves. Since the beginning of time, the overlords were always cautious about their subordinates getting stronger. If the Imperial Marshal Saint rejected this recommendation in front of so many people, it would harm the reputation that he had built in the civilians' minds. Perhaps others would say that he indeed was trying to rebel. Sir, you are the most powerful warrior of Zenith and the most loyal subject of His Majesty. You will agree to this plea that only benefits Zenith, right? You won't keep all the military forces, right? Purple-robed Grant shouted and tried to add fuel to the fire. Yeah, sir, if you don't agree, we will kill ourselves in front of you. For the future of Zenith. For peace. We are willing to sacrifice ourselves. Seeing this, the peers of purple-robed Grant shouted as well, trying to pressure Faye with their words. Some of them used their words artfully and blocked Faye's possible ways of punishing them. They referred to themselves as loyal subjects of Zenith, and they were in the moral high ground. If Faye punished them, it would be indecent and disloyal. The expressions of the masters of Marshal Saint Mountain changed a lot. However, they didn't dare to voice their opinions or get rid of these people. Although they weren't on a battlefield with weapons, it was more dangerous than that. Public opinion was powerful. If this situation weren't handled well, the reputation that Faye had among the civilians would be destroyed. However, Faye didn't have any reactions. The king frowned as if he were thinking about something, and he listened to these people and didn't interrupt them at all. After they were done, he glanced at their faces and landed his eyes on the purple-robed noble. At this moment, Grant felt an enormous pressure on his entire body as if a mountain were thrown onto him. Now he realized how powerful this man was. With a move of his finger, he could kill everyone here more than 100 times. Tell me, who told you to come? How do you know that I'm going to walk past this place at this moment? Faye asked with a slight frown. He endured this long since he was thinking and trying to figure out who was behind all this and who was trying to use these people to say these words. He just got summoned by Emperor Yasin, and these people blocked him on the way here. Could it be? Faye suddenly thought of an unfortunate possibility. He quickly shook his head and threw all his guesses to the back of his mind. No one is directing us. We are here for the future of Zenith. We have been waiting for your highness here every day. Purple-robed Grant hesitated for a second and continued to act. The future of Zenith? The fate of the Empire? You are saying this, but how can bastards like you control the fate of Zenith? Humph! You are just a few weak flies, but you are acting all loyal and honorable. Shameless! How dare you calculate against me? You are like ants. Faye said with a cold expression and lightly pressed down his hand. Bam! Before purple-robed Grant could react to the situation, he was slammed into the ground like a nail with only his head exposed. Faye's granular control of his force was meticulous. Although Grant wasn't injured, he realized his situation and became anxious. His head turned blank, and he couldn't believe that the king of Chambord dared to attack them. This wasn't something that they planned for. Soon, he learned that he wasn't injured at all, and this discovery made him have a misunderstanding. Therefore, he became bold. After a moment of pause, he screamed as if he were a pig that was being slaughtered. Ah! Save me! Mr. Marshal Saint, you can't do this. You can kill me, but the citizens of Zenith will remember this. For the fate of Zenith, I still uphold my view, and I'm willing to die for it. I'm a loyal subject. Emperor Yasin, Grant is your most loyal servant. I'm willing to die for you. The nobles behind Grant all started to shout after a moment of panic. Mr. Marshal Saint, you disappoint us. Mr. Marshal Saint, are you trying to betray the royal family? Humph! You aren't willing to surrender the power of Chambord. You are up to no good. Fei heard them but didn't even glance at them anymore. He walked past them and moved toward the royal palace. A few of the nobles looked at each other and tried to hold onto Fei's legs, but they couldn't get within 1 meter of the king, and they were knocked away by an invisible energy sphere. Fei was a Sun-class lord. If he weren't willing to, no one above Sun-class could get close to him. The shouts and provocations of the nobles grew even louder and crazier. Fei paused after walking forward for several steps, and he said while impatiently waving his hand, "Since this is the case, and they do want to die, just kill them." The noisy crowd instantly turned silent due to Fei's sentence. The 23 nobles who were kneeling on the ground and roaring righteously, including Grant, who was stuffed into the ground like a nail, were shocked. And so were the 8 masters of Marshal St. Mountain. They all stared at Fei and didn't know what to do. Perhaps others would be troubled by your plan, but unfortunately you chose the wrong target. How can 2 top-tier masters fall into traps designed by weak ants like you? Fei said coldly with disdain. How powerful was the king of Chambord? After seeing the tragic situation of low-level military officers like Rybri, he dared to barge into St. Petersburg, kill evil masters of Iron Blood Legion, under the stare of tens of millions of people, and scold the elder prince. How crazy was that? Therefore, it was impossible to trouble Fei today with the current setup. The people in front of Fei were only weapons that were used by others. Even though Grant looked intelligent, he was only witty and not wise. Kill them all. Such despicable excuses. Such fake faces. These people will bring trouble to the Empire in the future anyway. Fei said to the masters of Marshal St. Mountain and left. Tink, 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 tink. The masters of Marshal St. Mountain clearly understood Fei's intent now, and they drew out their weapons. Their swords instantly reflected chilly light when they were unsheathed. Purple-robed Grant and the other nobles who came with him were terrified. They couldn't believe that the Imperial Marshal Saint didn't care about his own image and dared to execute loyal subjects of Zenit in public. This outcome was completely out of their expectations, even though they had planned for a lot of scenarios. King of Chambord, are you trying to commit treason? How dare you try to kill the loyal officials of the Empire? Grant got anxious. Even though he was smart, he got worried and scared. Therefore, he instantly put a big label on Fei, trying to deter the king a little. However, that white-robed figure completely ignored him and left without even reacting to him. What surprised Grant even more was that the citizens of Zenit who had surrounded them didn't react the way that he expected, which was pointing their fingers and accusing the king of Chambord before protecting them, the loyal officials. Instead, these residents of St. Petersburg pointed at the nobles and chattered. Who are these people? How dare they try to conspire against Mr. Marshal Saint? These bastards! These dirty nobles! When it is time for battle, no one can see them. After the storm is over, they all jumped out and started acting all righteous, saying that they are thinking for the Empire. Yuck! These despicable losers! They are shameless! Yeah, Mr. Marshal Saint has battled enemies many times for Zenit and Emperor Yasin. When Mr. Marshal Saint was fighting enemies, where were these bastards? How come they still have face to accuse Mr. Marshal Saint? They are all bad eggs. Execute them all. Kill all these despicable criminals. All they can do is to instigate conflicts. When the nobles such as Grant heard the chatter of the civilians, they felt like they were inside a freezer. Never in their dreams did they expect that the king of Chambord, who was known as Butcher and Executioner, among the nobles had such prestige and reputation in public. The nobles' plan wasn't effective at all. It was clear that they were on the wrong path to begin with. Whoosh! 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 The sword energies flashed, and streaks of blood rushed into the air. The masters of Marshal St. Mountain moved, and Grant's head rolled on the ground first. His expression was vicious, and fear and regret could be seen in his eyes. The other nobles who participated in this operation saw that the situation was turning bad. Some of them collapsed onto the ground, defecating all over themselves uncontrollably, and some of them cried and turned around, trying to flee by rushing into the crowd. Unfortunately for these nobles, these 8 masters of Marshal St. Mountain were all great disciples of former Marshal St. Krasik. Although they weren't moon-class elites yet, they were top-tier star-level warriors. As fast as lightning, they easily caught all these weak nobles. The 23 nobles who came here today were all executed by these masters. Blood soon stained the street. This time, the king of Chambord's other title, Noble Butcher, was now set in stone. More than 20 nobles fell under his blade today. Some of the citizens backed away several steps in fear, and some clapped and cheered. Among the crowd, a few normal-looking young men saw this and quietly backed away, slowly disappearing into the street. Deep inside the royal palace of Zenit, this was Fei's first time coming to the Striving Palace where Emperor Yasin lived. Fei didn't expect this Striving Palace, where many important officials dreamed of entering once in their lifetime, would be so simple. Except for the dragon statue that was laying in the courtyard before the palace, which looked majestic, the living place of Emperor Yasin, a demigod, wasn't as luxurious as the mansions of the wealthy merchants in the city. Boston ivy grew all over the palace, and the leaves almost completely enveloped this place. The internal decorations of the Striving Palace were also simple. Almost all the furniture was made from stone, looking crude and natural. Since it wasn't fancy and over the top, it was calming. Except for the necessary stone tables and chairs, there was almost nothing else. However, this was after all the residence of a demigod. Fei could sense that a pressure which could only be detected by masters in this place. Like a surging tsunami behind a dam, it could easily break through and cause destruction. Emperor Yasin was sitting behind a huge stone table by the window, and the bright sunshine landed on this emperor's body, turning his body golden and painting a beautiful picture. He was sitting there patiently, waiting for Fei's arrival. Fei got into the palace alone. After bowing and paying respect, he sat on the other side of the stone table lightly as Emperor Yasin had gestured. This was Fei's first time observing this great emperor this up close. Emperor Yasin's bright eyes were as brilliant as stars and deep like the ocean. His nose was tall. His lips were long but not thin. His hair was long and blue. His chin revealed his confidence and persistence, and his faint smile added to his charisma. The outstanding appearance gave this emperor a unique aura, making him seem a lot younger. In fact, he appeared very young, unlike someone close to 60 years old. However, the demigods could live for a long time, more than 1,000 years. From this point of view, Emperor Yasin was still very young. The atmosphere was a little strange. Since Fei walked into this palace, Emperor Yasin had been staring at him. This stare didn't contain any pressure, and it didn't make Fei feel like he was sitting with a legendary emperor or a powerful demigod. Instead, he felt like he was sitting down with a good friend. Emperor Yasin didn't say anything from the beginning to the end. Fei couldn't figure out why Emperor Yasin summoned him, and he couldn't really ask. Therefore, he had to wait patiently for Emperor Yasin to speak first. When Fei walked out of the royal palace, he had a weird expression on his face. He couldn't figure out why Emperor Yasin summoned him from the Marshal St. Mountain to the Thriving Palace right after this emperor became a demigod. Just to look at me for a while? Fei thought to himself. He stayed in the Striving Palace for a little over 10 minutes, and this legendary emperor stared at him for a while. Then, Emperor Yasin waved his hand and asked Fei to leave. From the beginning to the end, the two of them didn't say anything. Even though Fei was intelligent, he didn't know why Emperor Yasin was doing this. After walking out of the royal palace, Fei didn't linger around. He politely declined the invitations to parties from the high-level officials and nobles, and he directly returned to the Marshal St. Mountain with the 8 masters. Inside a gloomy palace in a majestic and well-guarded noble estate in St. Petersburg. The king of Chambord actually executed Grant and his associates? Sitting at the head of the table, a person who was enveloped in a cloud of purple, misty energy heard his subordinates report and fell into a moment of silence before murmuring to himself. The king of Chambord's boldness sure surprises me. However, he killed nobles in public in front of the royal palace. Yet the royal family didn't give him any punishment. What kind of a secret is there? Yasin sure has trust in this little king. However, today's plan is only the first step. The taste of power can even turn father and son into mortal enemies. I want to see how much longer Yasin can still trust this little king. Hee hee. When Faye got back to the Marshal St. Mountain with his 8 guards, it wasn't 12 at noon yet, and Faye used this time to teach little Luffy more about combat techniques. At noon, Golden Sun Knight Chris Sutton came to visit Faye. After all the prior incidents, Sutton was like Faye's half-disciple. In the entire empire, Sutton was one of the very few people who could come and go from the Marshal St. Mountain freely. This time, Sutton was here to ask Faye some questions about cultivation. The king was very willing to help. Since he had Demon King's sword, he mastered a lot of combat techniques from the mythical era. Sutton's family background was prestigious, and he knew a lot about modern combat techniques. By talking with Sutton, Faye would be able to help himself and also get some cues and clues as to the future of his cultivation. The two started talking at noon, and it was evening before they finished. Only then did Sutton leave in satisfaction. In the night, Faye entered Diablo World to continue to kill monsters and level up. He wanted to pass Hell mode as the barbarian first and see if there would be any rewards. Except for that, he had to quickly level up all his other 6 characters, which were Paladin, Assassin, Sorceress, Necromancer, Druid, and Amazon. Then, he could see if Diablo World would change after all 7 of his characters passed Hell mode, giving him the chance to advance into the demigod realm or higher. During the night, Faye found the young alchemist Anya, who was imprisoned in the Crystalline Passage, and also defeated Elder Nilothak, who betrayed the barbarian clan, completing both quests, Prison of Ice and Betrayal of Haragath. According to the plot, the despicable traitor Nilothak already gave the relic of the ancients to Baal, so Baal could enter the Worldstone Chamber by passing through the Arete Summit without having to fight the 3 Ancient Ones. Now, Faye had to get to the Arete Summit and challenge the 3 Ancient Ones before entering the Worldstone Chamber and defeat Baal to stop it from staining the Worldstone. Then, Faye would have passed Normal Mode, Nightmare Mode, and Hell Mode as the Barbarian. After completing Prison of Ice and Betrayal of Haragath, Faye's Barbarian character was already Hell Mode level 91, and he got a lot of gold coins, potions, and 4 legendary items. Unfortunately, the other components of the Immortal King item set that Faye was hoping for didn't appear. On the second day, Faye decided to leave St. Petersburg and return to Chambord City after training his spirit energy in the morning. After the battle with D'Alessandro, the Gold Saints and Priest Jesse already returned to Chambord City. Now, Faye planned everything at the Marshal St. Mountain, and he left the mountain with little Luffy, who wanted to see the world, heading back to Chambord. With Faye's strength, he could get back to Chambord City in a few minutes if he flew in the sky. However, since little Luffy had stayed on the Marshal St. Mountain for a long time, he wanted to see the scenery along the way. Faye was willing to let this disciple of his, who was born in a noble family, to see and experience the life of ordinary citizens. By getting close to the people, little Luffy would have a better understanding of the world and wouldn't get arrogant and ignorant like most of the nobles. Therefore, they went to a few places and paused frequently. They only got into the territory of Chambord after 4 days. After close to 1 year of careful management by the big and small officials who were promoted by Chambord, the cities of Chambord Kingdom no longer looked weak and poor. The territory of Chambord felt very different from other kingdoms and empires in the region. Even the most ordinary people had cheerful smiles on their faces, and Faye would bring little Luffy into every town and village that they passed to get a feel. Out of Faye's 2 disciples, Inzaghi was from the poor neighborhood of Hot Spring Gate, and he experienced the struggles in life and had a feel for the ordinary people. However, Luffy was different. He was from the Shueluan Kingdom, and his father was the famous One Sword. Although he wasn't that spoiled, he was in the noble circle, making him feel superior and look down on the ordinary people. Before Faye traveled through space and time, he was only a normal university student. His parents passed away when he was young, and he went through a lot of hardship. Therefore, he could be considered to be at the bottom of the social ladder. Once he came to this world, his view of things was different from the haughty nobles. He had high hopes for this disciple, so he didn't want Luffy to become someone like Grant or Arshavin. Now, Faye finally realized that it was freaking hard to be a good teacher. Little Luffy was a good kid, and he gradually understood Faye's intention along the way. After 3 more days, the two finally arrived at Zuli River. Looking ahead, the green mountains extended to the horizon, making the scenery seem majestic, and Chambord City was inlaid in the picture like a pearl. Now, Chambord City was very different. As Faye got more famous, the population of Chambord increased by many folds, and Chambord City was also expanded. Different from the lonely city to the north of Zuli and the grass plain to the south of Zuli, Chambord City was renovated and upgraded, and a lot of shrines, markets, buildings, and god statues were being built on the south bank of Zuli River with new roads extending in all directions. A lot of people were walking around, and the chattering and noises could be heard. A big town was being built right beside Chambord City, making the area seem prosperous. Faye stood by Zuli River and got a little emotional. Wow, Master, that is so big. What is that? Little Luffy suddenly saw something, and he was stunned. He quickly raised his hand and pointed at it before asking Faye. Faye smiled and didn't respond to little Luffy right away. In reality, he already saw those two big things that were flying in the sky like two sharks swimming in the ocean. They were the Xianxia of the Ormond Empire that Faye captured during the previous war with the 10 Empire United troops. After being modified by Mad Scientist's laboratory and Chambord's arsenal, their looks completely changed. Under the sunshine, they had a metallic texture to them. These two Xianxia had undergone major changes to both their appearances and internal setup. Mad Scientist's laboratory was able to smelt a light metal that was extremely rare from the ironwood that could only be found in the Ormond Empire. With all the 7 Xianxia that Chambord obtained, the ironwood in them was stripped and only smelted enough material to build 2 new Xianxia. This new material had a faint silver color, and it looked no different from metal. It was even lighter than ironwood, but it was harder and more durable. Also, it had one unique and critical advantage that ironwood didn't have. This new material was flame retardant and couldn't be burned. Like a bug in the game, the Mad Scientist's laboratory could decode and decrypt almost anything, and the secrets of the complex Xianxia were completely exposed to Chambord. With the help of Demon King's wisdom, which recorded many blueprints of the flying ships in the mythical era, Chambord rebuilt the Xianxia with many upgrades. Therefore, the 2 Xianxia that were flying above the sky of Chambord were high-tech products that utilized Chambord's intellectual properties. Without exaggeration, one of Chambord's Xianxia could take on 10 of Ormond's Xianxia. They couldn't be compared on an individual basis. Let's go. I will take you to check out these 2 beasts. Faye was suddenly in the mood. He grabbed little Luffy's hand and dashed toward the Xianxia that was flying like a dash of light. In a flash, they were close to a Xianxia, which was about 1,000 meters above the ground. Just when Faye was about to land on the deck, strings of dense and ancient faint golden runes flew out of the Xianxia as if something were activated. These runes were engulfed in golden mist, and they enveloped the entire Xianxia, forming a large oval energy sphere and blocking Faye outside. With Faye's strength that was close to peak burning sun realm, he pressed onto the golden oval energy sphere casually, but he only dented it for about half a meter. He couldn't break it right away. Damn it! Who is it? Who dares to attack my Black Pearl? You will get your dick cut off. A feminine shout roared through the sky like thunder, and it was followed up by a series of loud sirens. Then, flashing red magic warning lights appeared, changing the color of the sky. On the deck, a tough man with a red bandana, a head full of dreads, smoky eyes, brown leather shoes, and a double-hand saber on his waist was commanding soldiers wildly, and the soldiers moved a semi-automatic magic cannon toward his direction. They are reacting pretty fast. It seems like their training paid off. Faye was satisfied with the performance of Sparrow and the soldiers on the Xianxia. Using the space-traveling ability of the Throne of Chaos, he passed through the faint golden energy sphere and appeared on the deck. What? They got in? Captain Sparrow was quite surprised on the deck. All of this happened in a flash, and this former ship slave leader didn't expect that someone could get through the energy sphere created by semi-god tier runes. He instantly knew that this person was a powerful figure, and he ordered the soldiers to quickly retreat. The soldiers on the Xianxia were all elites out of elites of Chambord, and they were the treasures of the kingdom. Sparrow didn't dare to treat the soldiers like members of a suicide squad. Retreat! Sparrow drew out his saber and wanted to stop this enemy for a few seconds to buy time. A situation like this was already planned for. As long as he could buy some time, all the contingency plans would be executed. Huh? 5-star already? You sissy. You sure are growing fast. Faye caught Sparrow's saber with 2 of his fingers, and he teased him with a smile. He was pleased with this man's actions. All of this meant that this former wild ship slave was now loyal to Chambord. You dare to call me a sissy? Fuck. Sparrow hated others calling him a sissy, so he instantly jumped up like a dog that got its tail stepped on. However, he quickly saw who this enemy was, and he shut his mouth and felt awkward as if a mouse saw a cat. He became docile and single-kneeled, paying his respect to the king. Jack greets my lord. The soldiers who were backing off all recognized this enemy, and they were elated. With joyous expressions, they kneeled and chanted with tears in their eyes. They were the most loyal citizens of Chambord, and they almost worshipped the king. They could die for Faye without hesitation tens of thousands of times. Please get up. You are all doing good. Faye smiled and waved his hand, and a gentle force helped them to get up. Unstoppable cheers and chants sounded on the Xianxia. Soon, the news spread to the other Xianxia, and the soldiers on that barge also cheered. The 2 new Xianxia got new names. One of them was named Black Pearl, and the other was named Cyclops. Sparrow and Barbassa, who had been ship slaves for a long time, were now the captains of the 2 barges. After living in Chambord City for a while, they accepted this little peaceful kingdom and felt like this was their home, finally seeing themselves as a part of Chambord. These 2 became the captains due to Faye. The king really liked Pirates of the Caribbean, and he appointed these 2 as the captains, going against many people's recommendations. At that time, a lot of people didn't understand why the wise and powerful king favored these 2 ship slaves who were wild and reckless. But after some time had passed, these 2 former ship slaves demonstrated their abilities and showed their talent at commanding the Xianxia, gaining others' respect. After energy flames flashed on the deck of Black Pearl, Barbassa walked out of a small teleportation array. With respect and admiration, he walked over and single-kneeled in front of Faye. This Cyclops still had his wild aura, and he was wearing a big black round hat and carrying a thin sword. He had a greasy smell, and liquor stains could be seen on his beard. It was clear that he was drinking before rushing over. Soon, the news of the king's return spread in Chambord City. With energy flames flashing on the deck, many high-level officials of Chambord appeared. A large group of people kneeled on the ground and chanted, and their cheers resonated in the sky. Then, cheers also sounded from Chambord City below the Xianxia, and the entire city fell into an unstoppable elation. People rushed onto the street, and they danced and cheered crazily. The heated atmosphere made it look like a volcano that had been accumulating energy for many years, and the lava was overflowing throughout the world. Chambord City hosted a grand party, and the entire city fell into a crazy and excited state, celebrating the king's return. Right now, the Chambord kingdom was no longer that poor and weak kingdom which had been struggling on the verge of death. Under the careful management of the new officials that Faye promoted, the wealth of the kingdom increased drastically. Right now, it was at the top of Zenith, and the royal family of Zenith might not be able to rival it. In the beginning, the Chambord kingdom had a meager population and farmland, so agriculture wasn't the main industry. After Chambord recruited and tamed all the powerful demon beasts 5 to 6 kilometers into the forests and mountains behind the city, making them into a demon beast legion, these ferocious beasts were restricted and didn't hurt people anymore. Finally, the abundant resources in the forests and mountains opened their arms to humans. For the last year or so, many merchant caravans and mercenary groups stationed in Chambord City, and the adventurers ventured into the forests and mountains. They obtained many rare and precious herbs and plants, and they hunted many low-level demon beasts and obtained many demonic cores. As a result, it brought prosperity to Chambord and provided a lot of taxes. Gradually, Chambord City was becoming the commerce center of the northern region of Zenith. Most of the people living in this ancient city were original citizens of the kingdom, and the rest were the wealthy and prestigious merchants, elite mercenaries, and envoys from other kingdoms and empires. However, even these high-level people didn't dare to slight and be arrogant in front of the citizens of Chambord. Right now, Chambordians truly experienced a transformation and flipped their situation. They were confident wherever they went. The law of the 12 tables were being executed to the teeth, and the Saint Seias instantly crushed the foreign nobles and warriors who bullied the citizens of Chambord. After that, no one dared to challenge Chambord's laws again. In this chaotic world, Chambord City was becoming a paradise that many people wanted to go to. After the grand celebration, Fei returned to the city and stayed very low-key. The envoys in the city heard that the king had returned, and they all wanted to meet him. Also, many prominent merchants and mercenary group leaders wanted to experience the presence of this legendary king and establish some friendships. However, they all failed in their attempts. Fei was busy for the next 4 to 5 days. During the day, Fei had to take care of many administrative issues that had been stacking up for the last while, teach people like Inzaghi, Luffy, and the other 4 orphans from Hot Spring Gate, and go to Mad Scientist's laboratory to be tortured by Akira and Kane. During the night, except for spending time with the 2 beautiful queens and doing what they liked to do, he had to use most of his time to stay in Diablo World to level up and get more powerful. Since the king was already so busy, he had no time to deal with these trivial matters. On the 4th day after Fei returned to Chambord, Fei and Valkyrie Elena got together and pushed the plot in Hell mode of Diablo World to the last quest. After killing many powerful monsters, they got to the Throne of Destruction. The Throne of Destruction was a huge underground maze, and the dark red air inside this place seemed like blood, filling every inch of the space. In here, the laws were greatly suppressed, and the laws of nature and laws of power were completely different from the outside world. Demon Ball controlled this underground palace, and its enemies who entered this space would get their strengths greatly weakened. This was Baal's home court, and the controller could increase its power by many folds. Even though Fei had defeated the 3 ancients ones of Barbarian on the Arit Summit in the challenge and obtained their powerful inheritance that was on the peak Burning Sun realm, becoming a Hell mode level 99 Barbarian, he still had to be very careful in the Throne of Destruction, when Elena, who was a Hell mode level 85 magic archer with Paladin bloodline, was with him. Baal's crazy laughter resonated inside the space, and all the elite bosses in Hell mode were summoned by Baal again, appearing before Fei. Without a doubt, this was going to be a hard battle. After spending about 4 hours, Fei finally destroyed all the monsters in the Throne of Destruction, and found the portal that connected to where Baal was hiding, World Stone Chamber. The World Stone Chamber was the final location in Diablo World, and the final boss, Baal, looked like an alien from the movie Alien. It mastered all kinds of skills such as teleportation and magic spells. It was hard to deal with. What was more terrifying was that as the final boss in Diablo World, Baal was much more intelligent than other bosses, and it had more godly power. In fact, Baal's strength was far beyond Fei's expectation. In the end, Fei had to resort to his potions. He used all his potions and barely depleted Baal's HP without dying. Even though Fei didn't die, he paid a hefty price. Half of his body almost got destroyed, and his intestines were exposed in the air. On top of that, the bones in his arms, chest, and legs were all broken as well. His broken bones pierced through his muscles and skin, and all his injuries had terrifying ice frost on them. If Fei didn't have the vitality of a Sun-class lord, he would have died and got turned into a cold corpse. Beside him, Valkyrie Elena was also severely injured. Her fingers that pulled on the bowstring were almost cut off by it. Seeing Baal whining and falling onto the ground, many souls that were swallowed by it struggled out of its body, dancing in the air cheerfully. Fei struggled to get up and grabbed the healing potions that Baal dropped, and he threw a bottle to Elena before drinking one himself. Then, his injuries were roughly healed and he could move normally again. Without a doubt, this was the closest that Fei had gotten to death in Diablo World. He almost got the answer to his question. Would he die in the real world if he died in Diablo World? Of course, in Diablo World, the risk and reward were proportional. When Fei staggered and got up, a beam of golden light suddenly shot down from the sky and enveloped him, instantly healing all the injuries on his body. As that cold and mysterious voice, which hadn't appeared in a long time, sounded by Fei's ear, his barbarian character finally broke through level 99 and reached level 100. Faye vaguely felt like he saw a new gate in front of him, and it was about to open. However, he was still one bit further away from reaching it. If I open this gate, I should be able to step into the demigod realm. However, this golden finger is coming to an end. I can't kill monsters and level up my barbarian character more. It is impossible. Faye's fear came true. After passing Hell mode, Faye's strength still stayed at peak Burning Sun realm and couldn't progress any further. After getting used to the new strength in his body, Faye turned around and found that Valkyrie Elena also leveled up. 3 beams of golden light shot down from the sky consecutively, meaning that she leveled up 3 times, reaching Hell mode level 88. After being enveloped by the golden light beams, Elena also healed up. Seeing this, Faye relaxed and looked toward Bale's corpse. Suddenly, his pupils contracted and he was elated. Beside Bale's giant, mountain-like corpse, a few green flames were burning and dancing, easily pulling on Faye's heart. This is the unique color for all the set items in Diablo world. When Faye got close, he was elated. Without needing to use Identify scrolls, Faye could tell that these were the 2 missing components of the Immortal King item set just by looking at them. He instantly used 2 Identify scrolls to reveal the properties and attributes of these 2 items. As a light flashed by, the names and the properties of the items appeared in front of Faye, and his guesses were right. They were both the missing components of Immortal King item set, and they were the helmet and the belt. The belt was about 30 centimeters wide, and it was in a faint silver color that was a little dreamy, looking a little different compared to the other components in terms of color. Also, this war belt that was named Immortal King's Detail looked light, and it had semi-hollow patterns with several mysterious gems inlaid in it. The helmet had a unique shape, and it looked like a godly bird that was about to take off. The wings on the helmet were about 40 centimeters long, and they were piercing into the sky at a 45-degree angle. Overall, it had a black iron tone, which was in harmony with the other 4 components of the Immortal King item set except for the belt. Without hesitation, Faye equipped the Immortal King's Detail war belt and the Immortal King's Will Avenger Guard. Instantly, the Immortal King item set was completed, and it seemed like heaven detected it. Streaks of lightning bolts and giant tornadoes appeared, and the howling wind and rumbling thunder resonated in the sky, as if they were cheering for the completion of the Immortal King item set. This was the unique phenomenon in Diablo world that would only appear when an item set was completely gathered. The higher level the item set, the grander the phenomenon. Instantly, Faye felt like streaks of energy were created in the core of his body before dispersing throughout. This was a unique sensation that could be felt in each of his cells. He clearly detected that his vitality was skyrocketing, and his body's resistance to each of the magic elements was increasing. Faye opened his eyes and looked through the helmet, and he felt like everything was much clearer. Even the natural elements could be seen, and they looked like the dust particles that were floating in the air. Is this the power of the Immortal King item set after it is completed? Faye was thrilled. Each component of the Immortal King item set had great properties. But when all 6 components were gathered, they offered bonus properties. Faye paid close attention to them and observed. Plus 20 to all barbarian skill level, plus 3000 to attack rating, plus 1500 to life, plus 500 to all resistances. Magic damage taken reduced by 100. Although Faye was prepared, he was utterly stunned by what he saw. The bonus properties offered by these 6 items far exceeded Faye's most optimistic estimates. These properties were more than 10 times higher than the ones offered in the game in his previous life. After seeing all this, Faye could barely contain his excitement. With a thought, all 6 items in the Immortal King item set appeared on his body. The helmet, armor, gauntlets, boots, belt, and hammer were all items used by the great leader of barbarians, Bulkathos, and they engulfed Faye. The hard and mystical armor protected all the vital parts and weak links in the human body, and the 6 components sensed each other and had magical reactions. Many vague runes appeared around the armor, releasing a mysterious power. Every component of the Immortal King item set connected perfectly, making Faye look like a metal beast as a metallic glare appeared on him. Out of everything, only Faye's eyes were exposed. The ventilation for the nose and the mouth on the helmet were done using 12 small, mysterious holes of the same size, and they were situated on the helmet, making the helmet look like a piece of art while making sure that the user wouldn't feel suffocated in it. At the same time, streaks of mysterious pressure came off Faye. It was an aura filled with wildness and a desire for freedom, perfectly merging ferocity and horror with orderliness and kindness. Also, he looked majestic and dignified, seeming to be an overlord who was walking amongst violence, killing, and death as a reincarnation of the Immortal King who battled around the world and even slayed gods. In fact, Faye had a weird feeling. He felt like he could turn all his enemies into dust while saving their bones and blood. Valkyrie Elena stood by the side and was happy for Faye. As an elite female rogue warrior, she had heard about the legends about Immortal King Bulkathos. This great king of barbarians was an elite warrior, and he left many unparalleled legends in Diablo world. According to legends, the person who could gather all the items that were used by the Immortal King would be blessed by him, receiving his inheritance and becoming the most powerful warrior on the continent. Faye lightly swung the war hammer in his hand. The hammer dashed forward casually, but the space around it started to crumble and collapse as it flew across the air. Clouds and lightning bolts concentrated above the Worldstone chamber. The lightning bolts crashed down directly from the sky and shattered the ancient stones on the ground. And for small tornadoes that were more than 10 meters tall howled and spun around Faye. The terrifying wind blades mixed into the tornadoes, and they could destroy everything. Even if a Sun-class lord were caught in them, they would be turned into pieces by the lightning bolts and tornadoes. Terrifying. Horrifying. Ha 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 ha. This mighty power. It is almost on par with the demigod realm. Faye laughed proudly and hysterically. Originally, Hell Mode level 100 Barbarian was only equal to a peak Burning Sun Lord. However, after the Immortal King item set was summoned, Faye's strength increased drastically. Although he didn't leap over the threshold and enter the demigod realm to stay above the laws of nature and create his own realm, his damage alone could rival a demigod. If Faye battled Emperor Yasin right now without holding anything back, the outcome was hard to guess. After gradually calming down from the initial excitement, Faye put away the Immortal King item set and started to look at the other rewards that Baal offered him. Except for the helmet and belt that completed the Immortal King item set, a few other items lay beside Faye. They had different colored light flashing on them. Unfortunately, they weren't components of the Mavina's Battle Hymn item set that Elena needed. After Faye and Elena cleaned up the battlefield, they put all the valuable items into their bags, and they were going to sell them to the NPCs in Harrogath for gold coins. Now, Faye didn't have much gaming time left. Following the corridor in the center of the Worldstone chamber, which was built in the void, Faye walked to the blood-red altar in the middle of the chamber. The Hell Mode Worldstone was stored here. This Worldstone of Hell Mode was similar to the Worldstones that Faye got from Normal Mode and Nightmare Mode in terms of shape, but its size was much larger. Its radius was more than half a meter, and the sky blue energy and blood-red energy rolled and tumbled inside it. It should be in the sky blue color, but the red, evil power of hell existed in it. Just as Faye expected, this Worldstone was also stained by evil. Faye didn't crush this Worldstone like what the Archangel had asked. Instead, he stored it in his storage ring. The energy contained in the Hell Mode Worldstone was terrifying, far exceeding the energy level of the Worldstones from Normal Mode and Nightmare Mode. According to the records on Diablo Continent, the energy inside this Worldstone could recreate another world. It was almost limitless. This Worldstone was a precious treasure without a doubt. Faye wandered around the Worldstone chamber and cleaned up again. After getting everything that was valuable, the familiar yet cold and mysterious voice sounded by his ears when he was about to exit the game. Congratulations, adventurer. As a reward for passing the game as a barbarian, you will receive the Throne of Destruction as a place that you can summon. All the laws of power inside the Throne of Destruction can be used by you to suppress your enemies. Faye was still busy in the following days. There were about 2 months before the agreed date between Faye and Emperor Yasin. the king was going to lead an expedition to the Anji Empire. Before that journey, he stayed in Chambord and kept himself busy. During the day, Fei would spend time with his two queens, teach the students and soldiers in Chambord Civil and Military University, and occasionally meet with high-level officials such as Head Minister Bast and Military Leader Brooke to talk about the urgent matters and the future growth of the kingdom. Except for these things, Fei would spend some time on the mythical altar inside the godly mountain in Sky City, using the power of the altar to purify the Hell Mode Worldstone continuously. This was also a process of injecting energy into Sky Castle. After receiving more energy, more of Sky Castle's power was revealed. In the clear pond in front of the godly throne in the godly king palace, one more golden lotus plant grew out. This golden lotus plant represented circulation, and the 9 blooming golden lotus flowers on this plant controlled 9 functions such as energy, air, plants, and water. Fei invested some of his time into it and clearly understood how to use these functions. After making the necessary adjustments, the power of Sky Castle was gradually showcased, becoming a firm city that about 50,000 people could live in. This was great news to Fei. After careful consideration and thinking back to the catastrophe that occurred when the Ormond Empire attacked the Chambord Kingdom last time, the king finally made the decision and was prepared to open Sky Castle to the citizens of Chambord. After a series of detailed discussions, some high-level officials and original residents of Chambord gradually moved into Sky Castle after strict inspection and review. Without a doubt, only a fortress like Sky Castle could protect the ordinary people in this chaotic era. For the warriors of Chambord, the natural elements were immense in Sky Castle, and the laws of nature were more apparent here. Cultivating in Sky Castle for a day was equivalent to cultivating in the outside world for 10 days. Therefore, moving the warriors of Chambord to Sky Castle would significantly increase the kingdom's strength. At night, after the two queens fell asleep, Fei entered Diablo World to kill monsters and level up, trying his best to increase his strength. The events on the Azeroth continent were happening at a fast pace, giving Fei a sense of urgency and danger. He didn't dare to relax at all. Time passed by quickly, and Chambord entered a stage of rapid and explosive growth. In all this busyness, 2 months quickly passed by. When Fei was in Diablo World, he tried to increase the level of his paladin character crazily. With the leveling up experience of his barbarian character and the high strength of his paladin character, Fei pushed his paladin character to Hell Mode level 100 after 60 days, passing Diablo World as a paladin. This was almost unimaginable. It was clear that this was a quick run. Since his objectives were leveling up and passing the game, he didn't pay much attention to the details like how he did to his barbarian character. He didn't carefully understand the power of the paladin and didn't fully comprehend this class. And he didn't find ancient combat techniques in Demon King's sword that could be merged with the skills of the paladin to develop this class further. Therefore, Fei's paladin character was equivalent to a peak burning sun lord who mastered all the paladin skills in Diablo World. Creating a peak burning sun lord in 60 days? If others learned about Fei's growth speed, they would lose their minds. It was worth mentioning that Fei's luck was good, and he collected the Griswold's Legacy item set which suited his paladin character during this quick run. This was a set of items that the great paladin Griswold had used in battle before. In history, Griswold was a legendary paladin who was exceptionally powerful and virtuous. His stories and honor were passed around the entire Diablo continent. Unfortunately, this mighty paladin was killed by the evil power of a Lord of Hell, and his corpse was controlled by the evil energy and turned into an incarnation of evil. This story was sad and pitiful. Griswold's legacy had 4 components, and they were a corona, a shield, armor, and a caduceus. It was heard that angels blessed each item in the set, and Griswold's holy will and energy would instill power in the user of this item set. Although it wasn't as famous as the Immortal King item set, it was a great item set for a paladin. With this item set, Fei could switch to paladin mode and potentially challenge a demigod. Except for that, Fei also got 3 more world stones that were from normal mode, nightmare mode, and hell mode. They were invaluable treasures. Although they were all stained, the energy contained in them was enough to make gods go crazy. Therefore, the king carefully stored these 3 world stones for now. The only thing that disappointed Faye was that the reward which he was anticipating didn't appear after he passed Diablo World as the Paladin. He was hoping that he would get a clue as to what he could do to increase his strength after passing Diablo World, but the cold and mysterious voice didn't say anything. Less than a month was left until the date that Faye and Emperor Yasin had agreed upon. Before leading an expedition to the Angie Empire, Faye focused on assassin mode and started leveling up his assassin character.